You weren't supposed to see this. Not the data, not the lap deltas, not the behavioral shifts inside the garages. But now that it's out, it's clear that something big was being hidden on the final day of testing. Barcelona, day 5. On paper, it looked like routine mileage. Teams closing programs, running race sims, packing up. But if you followed the numbers, really followed them, you'd notice something changed. Not in the public lap times, not in the broadcast commentary, but in the silent gaps between the stints. Drivers who had pushed for 3 days straight suddenly coasted. Telemetry that was expected to peak, flatten, and in the data passed quietly between engineers. There it was, a new pattern, something that didn't fit, because one team, just one, may have triggered a reaction the others weren't ready for. Not a part, not a setup, but a truth about who's actually leading development for 2026. And that's why this data wasn't meant to be public, because what it shows could change the entire season before it begins. The final day of preseason testing in Barcelona is usually calm. Teams run through long stints, collect tire degradation data, and wrap up performance checks. It's not where headlines are made. It's where setups are finalized. But this time, day 5 didn't feel like closure. It felt like a redirection. Lap times were shared, but no one was watching them too closely. At least, not at first. What teams were watching instead was each other. Because by mid-morning, something had shifted. Not on the surface, not in the lap charts, but inside the garages. Ferrari's engineers stopped communicating over open channels. McLaren's telemetry feeds went private for over an hour. Red Bull's usual updates to their partner teams stopped entirely. This wasn't paranoia. It was containment. Because while the timesheets showed Charles Leclerc in second place, just behind George Russell, the sector data told a different story. Ferrari was lifting in high-speed corners, not because of balance issues, but because they didn't want to trigger attention. When Oscar Piastri went second fastest in the afternoon, his run looked clean, but again restrained, as if there was more in the car, and they didn't want to show it. Red Bull's run was short, just 69 laps, no late push, and no media interaction from Verstappen. That's not just coincidence, that's choreography, because what these teams saw in each other's data was more than just pace. It was a pattern, and by the end of day 5, that pattern had shifted the entire paddock dynamic. By midday, something was clearly off. Ferrari had just posted their best time of the test, a 1 minute and 17.6 seconds. It was clean, precise, controlled. But that wasn't the problem. The problem was what came next. They didn't go back out. No follow-up runs. No tire degradation tests. Not even system checks. They simply stopped. Red Bull noticed first. Within 20 minutes, Verstappen was back in the garage. The car wasn't being worked on. It was being scanned. Engineers huddled near the rear floor, quietly discussing load balance. The data hadn't shown anything obviously wrong, but they were reacting to something, and not something on their car. At McLaren, Oscar Piastri was asked to short shift out of turns 3 and 5. These aren't corners where fuel saving usually matters. And yet the team chose to hide their torque map when they were running fastest. Aston Martin quietly changed front wing settings on Alonso's car, but didn't log the changes on the FIA's open document channel. That's extremely rare, because during public testing, most changes are tracked for transparency. When they're not, it means something is being trialed outside of declared spec. The timing was too close to ignore. Within the span of 90 minutes, at least 3 top teams had either stopped running completely or deliberately obscured their run data. And once that pattern was noticed, the entire tone of the paddock shifted. This wasn't a test session anymore. It was a standoff. It wasn't just about lap times anymore. What started as data hiding quickly became something deeper. Teams weren't reacting to mechanical issues. They were reacting to each other. Ferrari's quiet speed had spooked people, not because it was dominant, but because it came without effort. The car rotated cleanly in mid-speed corners, with minimal correction from Leclerc. Throttle traces showed a level of trust in rear-end stability that rivals hadn't yet demonstrated. And for teams like Red Bull, that's a problem. Because if Ferrari has achieved that balance without active ride height systems, they may have cracked something fundamental, something that reaches past 2024 and into the foundations of the 2026 technical regulation shift. This is where the conversation inside garages began to turn. Engineers weren't talking about tire wear or stints. They were talking about concepts, about aero philosophy, about whether their current design assumptions still hold up. Because if Ferrari's stability is the result of a new aero-floor interaction, one that works under the upcoming active aero limits, then every other team might already be structurally behind. Red Bull knows this, so does Mercedes. And that's why the afternoon data blackout happened. Not because of testing limits, but because someone may have just exposed a flaw in the rest of the grid's foundational approach. Not with a press release, not with a headline, just with one lap and a decision to disappear. On paper, everything is legal. The FIA hasn't flagged any technical directives this week. No bulletins, no post-session clarifications, nothing that suggests something controversial happened. But inside the garages, teams aren't convinced. There's a growing suspicion that someone is exploiting a gray area, not in power delivery, not in aero mapping, but in how the floor interacts with rear downforce, under load variation and pitch control. This is the area that regulations do try to define, but never perfectly, because at high speed, under DRS conditions, a flexible edge on the floor or diffuser can dramatically improve stability, without ever tripping a static load test. And that's the problem. Static tests can't replicate track behavior. They simulate pressure, but not pitch, not rotation, not vibration under cornering. And what Ferrari might have found, what Red Bull seems to be scanning for, is whether someone has found a legal way to simulate active aero, without any moving parts. That would change everything, not just for 2024, but for how teams are approaching their 2026 designs, especially under the incoming energy deployment limits. Because if Ferrari's car is already mimicking a 2026 dynamic balance with a 2024 chassis, then what they've built is not just faster, it's ahead of schedule. And no one, especially not the FIA, wants to admit that publicly. Right now, in Brackley, Milton Keynes, Woking, and Maranello, simulations are being rewritten, not because of lap times, not because of headlines, but because someone's car behaved differently than expected, and no one can fully explain why. At Mercedes, the chatter is about aero balance. They're reviewing rear ride height sensitivity under cornering load, not because they saw it on their own car, but because they saw what Ferraris didn't do. No instability, no oscillation, no corrections from Leclerc or Sainz on high-speed entries. That means one of two things. Either Ferrari's setup was unusually conservative, which no one believes, or they found a structural advantage in how their floor, suspension, and energy recovery interact. At Red Bull, the concern is deeper, because they're already leading. But if Ferrari has cracked the 2026 airflow behavior early, that lead could vanish fast. Adrian Newey's influence is built on staying ahead of concept shifts. But this time, if Ferrari has landed somewhere unexpected, he'll be forced to respond. That's not just an update. That's a roadmap adjustment. And in F1, adjusting your roadmap in February means rewriting your Bahrain expectations and possibly your entire 2024 upgrade plan. McLaren? They're watching closely. Their car is balanced, fast in Sector 3, efficient on long runs. But if the fundamental floor behavior of Ferrari proves superior under evolving regs, they'll need to reprioritize development for flexibility, not just efficiency. Because now the question is no longer, who's fastest today? It's, who's accidentally discovered the future first? The final laps of day 5 rolled by without incident. No yellow flags, no stoppages, just clean, quiet running. On the surface, it was uneventful. Teams gathered data. Drivers signed off on final stints. Media outlets began packing up. But for those watching closely, not just the timing sheets, but the body language in the garages, something didn't feel finished. It felt suspended, not concluded, not resolved, just paused. And that's the real story no one's telling. Because while teams publicly thanked their sponsors, posted final day recaps, and smiled through press obligations, the engineers weren't smiling. They were already thinking about what comes next. In Bahrain, the curtain comes up, but the trick is already in motion. Ferrari may have shown a glimpse. McLaren hinted at something. Red Bull held back entirely. And Mercedes? Still piecing together what it all means. But here's the problem. Once the season starts, there's no more hiding. Whatever advantage was discovered in Barcelona, whether it was structural, aerodynamic, or philosophical, is already influencing how each team will begin their year. And the ones who don't adjust quickly, they won't just lose time. They'll lose trust in their car, their concept, their direction. So as we look ahead to the first race, Don't watch the podium. Watch the silence. Because in Formula One, it's never the loudest team that changes everything. It's the one that disappears, then reappears 0.2 faster.